Play with me like cats and a string. You don't understand the pain it brings. You don't ever wanna give me wings. You don't ever wanna set me free.
But if I lay down and I play dead and I stay dead, baby, you'll get sick of being the monster.
She grabbed my skin with the pliers, twisted it and pulled it out until it took a She grabbed my teeth and shoved them back up in my mouth. And when I looked up, he just cracked the stick over my head, and it started bleeding, and I fell to the floor.
On February 18, 1997, the Bristow, Tennessee Fire Department was alerted that a 911 call for assistance was received from the Emmanuel Baptist Church. Paramedics arrived at the church in Bristow, Tennessee at 11:10 a.m. and observed a teen laying on the back seat of the church van, thrashing about with arms and legs waving. The pastor of the church, Joseph Combs, greeted the paramedics, letting them know that this teen was his 19-year-old adopted daughter, Esther Combs. Joseph told the paramedics that Esther was initially discovered in the bathroom and that his family removed her from the bathroom and placed her inside the church van and then called 911. One paramedic asked Joseph to show him where they discovered her while the other paramedic began working on Esther. Joseph unlocked the door to a yellow building nearby. They entered a foyer, traveled through a second door, and proceeded through the fellowship hall. The paramedic testified that the hall was windowless and contained 2 or 3 sofa beds, flanked by a regular wall and 2 large plastic sheets. Clothes and trash were strewn about the floor, with pathways formed between the piles of debris, but the bathroom held no clues to what had happened to Esther. While Esther was being transported to Wilmot Bristol Regional Medical Center on the ambulance, Esther, who was no longer having a seizure, curled up in a fetal position and faced away from the paramedics. While doing this, Esther's shirt had lifted some, and the paramedics noticed scars on her back. One paramedic lifted her shirt just a little further and noted additional scarring. Her hands, arms, chin, forehead were also scarred. That paramedic would later say in all his 17 years of being a paramedic, he had never observed that many scars on a single person. The scarring was so bad that the ER doctor was unable to map them during the exam. Doctors counted 410 total injuries in various states of healing on that little girl's body. 410 injuries all over her body. When Esther's father, Joseph Combs, arrived at the hospital, he was asked about all the scars. He replied, "What scars?" The doctor said, "All over her body," and Joseph simply stated, "Esther falls a lot." Meanwhile, a nurse that was with Esther said she appeared disoriented and confused. Esther kept repeating to the nurse, "I'm sorry, don't hurt me, I made the coffee." She would become combative upon touch and kept saying, "I will be good." This is the story of Esther Combs, who survived one of the most awful cases of CA and SA, and I am here to help spread her story. Hello, my name is Holly. Welcome to the Murder She Shed. This is the place you hear rarely discuss true crime right here from my she shed. Help me spread awareness by smashing the subscribe button, liking, and adding a comment below. Before we begin, viewer discretion is advised as this case is extremely upsetting, involves CA, SA of a child, and attempted unaliving. Also, since the girl, formerly known as Esther Combs, prefers to be called Elsa Garcia, from now on in this story, we will be referring to her as Elsa. In 1977, when Joe and Evangeline Lopez Combs were unable to conceive children, they decided to adopt their son James. Evidently, they were very pleased, and the following year the couple went to what is now the Baptist Children's Home and Family Ministries and adopted a 4-month-old little girl. A sweet little baby that should have been loved and protected, but unfortunately she was not. They signed an adoption agreement and took custody of her, naming her Esther Alice Evangeline Combs, aka Elsa. Elsa's adoption would later be found to not even been legal because the couple didn't even finish the paperwork. So basically, Elsa was kidnapped by this couple. Strangely, Evangeline's womb was open, and the couple produced 4 biological children whom they named David, Cindy, Peter, and Sarah. At the time of the adoption of Elsa, the Combs lived in Maryville, Indiana, where Joe taught at Hyles Anderson College, a Bible college that you may have heard about before. It has a bad reputation. And now our nasty Joe Combs came from this college. The Combs moved from Indiana to Florida sometime in 1996 when Esther was 6 or 7 years old. Joe worked as a pastor in Florida for a few years. Thereafter, they traveled to various states, evangelizing on the road and living in trailer for approximately 1.5 years. In April 1989, the family settled down in Bristol, Tennessee, where Joe actually became the head pastor of Emmanuel Baptist Church. They lived in the trailer for a few more months, then transferred their residence to a yellow building on the church premises, which also housed the church gymnasium and fellowship hall. Inside this yellow building where the family resided was a house of filth and horror. There was piles upon piles of trash bags with pathways in between them, mice in the kitchen, some dead, with mouse feces scattered about, pools of black liquid in and under the kitchen sink, piles of dirty dishes and spoiled food, a large room with numerous beds and televisions, cats, birds, and other animals living inside, with feces scattered throughout. Sounds like quite the place to live. Like I said, Joe was now the new pastor of this church where they resided, and his wife Evangeline, a stay-at-home mother, homeschooled the kids and worked alongside her husband with church duties. From an early age, Elsa was threatened that if she wasn't good, that she would be returned to the adoption center, which actually might have been a great thing for her had that occurred. But it did not, and she was stuck being raised by this evil couple. Elsa never received an education from Evangeline. The Combs never taught her how to read or write. The other children participated in homeschooling sessions, but Elsa was not allowed to join the lessons until her chores were completed, and this did not happen often. Visitors were not allowed to visit where the Combs family lived in the fellowship hall of the church, nor could the children have other friends aside from their siblings. Joe said this was because their home was a mess. Elsa recalled that various church members had come by at different times to deliver them some food, but they were either met at the door and not allowed in, or the Combs family would not even answer the door, and the visitor would eventually leave the food on the doorstep. On occasions that Elsa was not allowed to attend church services, she was ordered to stay in a small room near the men's bathroom. No one stood guard over her, but Evangeline placed powder in front of the door. Footprints in the powder would reveal any disobedience. This area by the bathroom was also where Elsa slept the majority of the time. She was not permitted to sleep with the other children because apparently they said she snored really loud and smelled really bad. The couple referred to Elsa as a servant. At home, she was responsible for the laundry and the ironing, making the beds, cleaning the dishes, and the house, cooking the meals, making the grocery list, and whatever else needed to be done. She was basically their Cinderella. She made the grocery list by copying the letters from near empty packages of food since she couldn't read or write. Elsa's siblings had no responsibility in the way of chores, and Elsa did not go to bed until her chores were completed, normally between 3:30 and 5 a.m. in the morning. The other members of the family usually retired between midnight and 1 a.m., and they arose anywhere between 9 and 11 a.m., and it didn't matter whatever time these members of the Combs family got out of bed. Elsa was responsible for preparing that person's breakfast. If all 7 of them got up at different times, she cooked 7 separate meals. That would get so old. Elsa's earliest memory of torture was when she was 3 years old. Evangeline was mad because Elsa, who was only 3 at the time, woke up late. Evangeline grabbed Elsa by the hair, threw her in the high chair, and tied her down. Elsa, who was scared, then cried for hours. When Evangeline got tired of all the crying, she then dragged the high chair to the top of the stairs and pushed this baby down the stairs, still tied to the high chair. When it didn't completely fall down the full length of stairs, Evangeline then pushed it again. Evangeline then dragged her out to another cold room and left her there, still tied to the chair, and screamed at Elsa, "If you could only just be good." Those words were forever embedded in this baby's head. If you could only just be good. As she sat there, bruised, bleeding, crying in a cold room, and no one came to get her. If you can only just be good. On one occasion, while Evangeline was making oatmeal, she had taken the children to the bathroom to wash their hands before eating, all but Elsa, who decided to help and stirred the oatmeal for Evangeline, but dropped the spoon inside the oatmeal. When Evangeline discovered the spoon had fallen in the oatmeal, she forced Elsa's hands into this hot oatmeal to retrieve it. Her hands and arms were burnt as a result, and the wounds were very painful. Evangeline bandaged them herself. Elsa did not receive medical treatment. Once when Elsa was caught jumping on the bed, Evangeline picked her up by her arm and leg, swung her around, and threw her into the wall. She hit the wall with her face and 4 front teeth fell out. She was not taken to a dentist. Instead, Evangeline pushed the teeth back into Esther's head. After a while, they just reattached themselves. The punishments were most severe after she became older, when she didn't do her assigned task correctly. One time, Evangeline placed Elsa's hand on the counter and then hammered one of her fingers until it busted open. You know how painful it is to get hit on your fingers and your toes? So many nerves. And I have hit my finger with a hammer before, and it hurt so bad, and I didn't even bust it open. That would be so painful. This poor little girl had to endure that. Another time, Elsa was whipped with a rope by Joe because the babysitter had taught her how to write her name. What a sin. Joseph informed her that Jesus didn't learn to read and write until he was 12 and that she wasn't going to either. On another day, while the family was living in the trailer, Joe laid her on her back and whipped her stomach with the top of flip-flop sandal because he heard something about a pink belly. He did not stop until Elsa could remain perfectly still without crying. On yet another occasion, Evangeline whipped the bottom of Elsa's feet with an electrical cord because she believed Elsa had been kicking her curtains. Evangeline burned Elsa's legs because her little sister Sarah had a diaper rash, and Evangeline claimed it was Elsa's job to change Sarah's diapers. Evangeline viewed Sarah's rash as proof of Elsa's negligence. Wanting to demonstrate to Elsa how a diaper rash felt, Evangeline burned the inside of this little girl's thighs with a curling iron. The wounds were very painful, and it was difficult for Elsa to walk afterwards. Evangeline also beat the inside of Elsa's thighs with a shower brush to make bulls. First, she would use water to wet the brush in the inside of Elsa's thighs. Next, she beat the skin until it made bulls, and then beat the bulls until they broke open and started bleeding. One summer day, the Combs family was barbecuing outside when it began to rain. Usually something that would be fun for any child. A family getting to barbecue, enjoying a good meal, playing outside, running around. But to Elsa, it was one of the worst days of her life. Since it started to rain, they brought the grill inside, but Elsa had not finished cleaning the dishes or the laundry. As punishment, Joe took her into the gymnasium and beat her with a rope. Elsa was screaming, but Joe told her he would not stop beating her until she stopped screaming. She did not stop. Consequently, he wrapped the rope around her neck and draped her over his back. She recalled that her feet lifted off of the floor. Evangeline watched as her daughter was struggling to breathe and did nothing. Eventually, Elsa passed out. She woke up later on the floor. So basically, this evil couple almost killed her that day. When Elsa was just 4, Joe set her on his lap and made her touch his privates. By the time Elsa turned 7, Joe began essaying her. April 25th, 1989, Joe called Elsa to the bedroom, closed the door, and exposed himself to the little girl. He then placed Elsa's hands upon his privates and said he knew she wanted it. He made her put her head down, placed his privates, and called this sugar water from there on out. In one episode, Joseph informed Elsa that he wanted some coffee that day. She made the coffee and brought him a cup. He was sitting in a chair in the foyer at the time. He told her that he wanted to give her a birthday present and closed the door to the foyer. Elsa was then directed to get down on her knees and perform OS on him. Joseph instructed her how hard and how fast, and she was not allowed to spit the sugar water out. During one warm summer day, all the children were playing outside. Evangeline was also outside, and Joe was inside, standing by the door, watching the children. Joe called Elsa inside to perform OS on him. Elsa responded that she could not because the Bible said that it was wrong. Joe told her that it was okay with God because she was his adopted daughter, not his biological daughter. And even King David had concubines. On June 16, 1991, which happened to be Evangeline's birthday, Evangeline took all the children to the park except Elsa. Elsa remained behind because she had not finished cleaning the kitchen. Joe, who had been in a church meeting, came home before the rest of the family returned from the park. He stood before the kitchen window where he would be able to observe Evangeline's return. He had Elsa get underneath the counter to perform OS on him. On Thanksgiving Day in 1993, while Evangeline was in the kitchen cooking Thanksgiving dinner and yelling at Elsa because the dishes were not cleaned properly, she decided to send Elsa to the front of the building in order to be disciplined by Joe. After a while, he appeared to grow tired of whipping her. Since the family was busy in the kitchen and he was just sitting in the dark, he made Elsa perform OS on him. There was one time Joe was almost caught by Evangeline while essaying Elsa. On February 4th, 1992, Joe was in his office and had spilled a Coke under his desk. He instructed Elsa to bring him another drink and also clean up what he had spilled. She clambered onto the floor underneath his desk. He grabbed her head and made her perform OS on him as he sat in his chair. Elsa was still underneath the desk when Evangeline came into the room. Evangeline demanded to know what Elsa was doing down there. Joseph just simply composed himself and Elsa resumed cleaning the floor. Evangeline never asked about the incident again. While Joe performed the essay on Elsa, most of the PA was done by Evangeline. In February 1994, Elsa recalled that the other children were making Valentine cards. Evangeline became angry for some reason and took Elsa to the gymnasium to beat her. She began by beating Elsa's backside with a basketball bat. But Esther turned her body and the bat hit her elbow. Elsa claimed that it was very painful and her elbow swelled up, but she received no medical care, of course. Instead, her arm was placed in a sling for what seemed to Elsa like months. When church members asked questions about Elsa's arm, Evangeline told them that she sprained her elbow when she swung 2 gallons of milk, because that happens a lot. From that time forward, Elsa was unable to straighten her arm completely. In November 1994, Elsa recalled that this incident took place near Thanksgiving Day. She was cleaning out the refrigerator to create room for the holiday fair. To prevent Elsa from disposing of any edible foodstuffs, Evangeline wanted to check the spoiled food before Elsa threw it away. Quite a bit of food had gone bad. After a while, Evangeline appeared to find the parade of rotten food just tiresome. She threw a wooden shoe at Elsa's head, hitting her above the eye. The wound bled profusely. Evangeline tried to stop the bleeding because the wound was right on her face where people would be able to see at church. She knew Joe would be absolutely mad about this. Unable to check the bleeding, Evangeline got a sewing needle and began to stitch the wound closed. Elsa was in great pain and would not stop wiggling around, so Evangelina just sat on her while she finished stitching the skin together. Of course, no medical attention, only what Evangeline decided to give her. Upon discovering the injury, Joe restricted her from attending church until the wound healed. Later, Evangeline removed the stitches, and from there on out, Elsa wore a hairstyle with bangs to cover the forehead scar. Then in September 1994, Elsa testified that Evangeline was using needle nose pliers to construct a Christmas plaque that day. She called for Elsa. When Elsa arrived, Evangeline grabbed the skin on Elsa's hips with a pair of needle nose pliers. She then pulled and twisted Elsa's skin until a chunk came off. Evangeline called such wounds Mark of the Beast. Well, it's definitely Mark of the Beast because she is the beast that performed it. What a horrible, horrible person. I can't imagine doing that to your child, grabbing the pliers and chunking their skin off. That's just pure evil. Elsa was unable to recall anything she had done to deserve this punishment. She had no idea. November 1995, Elsa had a considerable amount of work to do that day, and she was running behind schedule. Evangeline asked Elsa whether she had completed cleaning the kitchen. She told a little white lie. She had planned to finish cleaning the kitchen at a later time, but Evangelina checked before she had a chance to actually complete it. As punishment for lying, Evangeline made Elsa drape her body over the kitchen window ledge and beat her with a baseball bat. Elsa's body kept slipping from the window, so Evangelina recruited Elsa's brothers, James and David Combs, to hold Elsa in place. The boys held her by the feet and hands while Evangeline beat her with the bat. Elsa claimed that the beating had broken her tailbone and she could barely walk. One time, Evangeline was angry because the kitchen was not clean, so she threw a spice bottle through the window and it shattered everywhere. Evangeline instructed Elsa to clean it up, and Elsa thought she actually complied, but she had missed one rather large piece of glass. To show Elsa what might have happened if one of the younger children had happened up on it, Evangelina took Elsa's arm and cut it open with the piece of the glass. The bleeding was heavy. To stop it, Evangelina ran her arm underwater. When she did not stop the bleeding, she stuffed paper towels into the wound and wrapped bandages around it. One day after the injured area began to heal, Evangeline flew into a rage for some reason, grabbed Elsa's arms, and tore the wound open again. The bleeding was profuse, but of course, what do you think? No medical treatment. On the gymnasium floor, Elsa was beaten with ropes, chains, whips, umbrellas, and bats. That's where she received her most severe beatings, is on this gymnasium floor. Can you imagine how hard it would be for her to walk into a gymnasium after that? Many people from the church knew something wasn't quite right, but said or did nothing. While Joe was preaching in Florida, his assistant pastor and wife babysit the Combs children. Joe informed his assistant pastor, Galen, that only a very few people were permitted to interact with the Combs children. Thus, he should consider it a great honor. Joe told Galen that it and his wife, they were only responsible for supervising the children, nothing more, because Elsa would take care of the food, the babies, the diapers, everything. Galen said Elsa was 9 years old at the time and took care of the babies just exceptionally well. She brought them their bottles, changed their diapers, prepared food for all of the children. She made whatever they asked for, whenever they asked for it. Galen also testified that Evangeline and Joe Combs treated Elsa differently from the other children. Joe had informed Galen that Elsa's purpose in life was to be a servant. That was what God had created her to be. Consequently, the Combs were training her to do just that. When Joe and Evangeline returned home on the nights that Galen babysat, they asked him for a report of how the children's behavior was. On those occasions that Galen reported a child other than Elsa had committed some indiscretion, the Combs would instead punish Elsa or send her to the office. According to Joe, the office was where the spankings took place. Joe informed Galen that it was necessary to not only spank a child through their rebellion, which meant to spank them until they stopped resisting, stopped struggling against you, and even stopped crying. Regarding Elsa's appearance, Galen stated that she was very frail, weak, and appeared sickly. He noticed a scar on her upper lip and another on her hand. She always wore long dresses which covered most of her body, her arms, and all of her legs. The dresses were often too big for her. She wore her hair long with bangs which covered most of her forehead. Her teeth were very bad, the worst he had ever seen, protruding out of her mouth and in deplorable conditions. When he asked about injuries on Elsa, Joe would tell him she was clumsy and fell a lot. Another man named Andy, who attended church at EBC, noticed Elsa's injuries on 2 occasions. The first time her arm was wrapped in gauze and supported by a sling. The second occasion, Elsa showed up for church with black eyes and bruises on her face. Joe said that Elsa was clumsy, fell down, things of that nature. Many church members stated that Elsa was responsible for taking care of the youngest child, Sarah. And whenever the Combs family attended a social gathering, Elsa would serve the other members of the family their meals. Elsa attempted to run away twice. Both times the police found her and returned her back to Joe. Joe always had an excuse for why she ran away. In 1997, age 19, Elsa had enough of the pain and torture and decided to end her life. Elsa waited until she finished her chores for the day at around 3 a.m. and gulped down a 24-ounce cup of antifreeze. Elsa says she got the idea when Evangeline deviated from allowing the children in the family to only watch shows like The Waltons and Little House on the Prairie, and showed them that people had been feeding antifreeze to cats and killing them. That's just a weird thing. You go from one extreme to another. You go from, I'm going to only let my kids watch Waltons and House on the Prairie to, I want to show my kids how to murder cats. This is the strangest, most weirdest woman. So Elsa hoped she would end up like one of these cats. This is when Elsa was transported to the hospital and all her scars were found. Detectives talked to Elsa for days and took pictures of her scars. Because the Combs house didn't have full mirrors, the pictures they showed her marked the first time she had ever seen all her wounds. I mean, she had no idea she looked like that, but yet she still tried to protect Joe and Evangeline. She still tried to protect him. She wouldn't tell the truth. Because police couldn't get Elsa to say anything about her abuse, and she was 19, they had no choice but to release her. She went back to living with the Combs, but Elsa says the Bristol police didn't give up. Among other things, they kept trying to get Elsa to talk to them about what had happened to her. Feeling the heat, the Combs sent her to several different homes during 1997 before she ended up in Georgia with Roger and Susan Combs, who was Joseph Combs' brother and sister-in-law. There she would finally tell the truth of what had happened to her. Susan said when Elsa arrived at her home, she would cry a lot, jumped when touched, and avoided most attempts to make eye contact. She possessed only a few shabby long-sleeve dresses and a cell phone. She could print, but was unable to write, cursive style, or spell well. She was also unable to make change with money or drive a car, and she did not have a Social Security card or driver's license. While living with Roger and Susan, Elsa began to gain weight and make eye contact with people. She also seemed very excited about wearing pants, something as simple as that, instead of dresses. And they even helped fix Elsa's tooth. All the kindness made Elsa strong enough to tell her story to the couple. Roger informed his brother Joe what Elsa had revealed, and of course Joe denied it. Roger cut his brother off and had Elsa go to the police.
I just wish you could tell me what I did to make you hate me. Because I loved you so much. Even though you put me through hell. Because I told myself you did it because you loved me. I would have done anything for you. I would have moved mountains if I thought it would make you love me. That's how much I loved you. That's how much you hurt me.
Joe and Evangeline Combs were indicted in November 1998 on multiple charges of aggravated CA, assault, and kidnapping. Joe Combs faced additional charges of fraud. They were sentenced to a combined total of 179 years in prison. Joe Combs was sentenced to 106 years but died in prison in 2015. Evangeline remains behind bars and applied for parole in 2019 but was denied. Elsa was eventually reunited with her birth parents. She changed her name, learned how to drive, and even went on to earn her high school diploma. She's now a mother of a little girl and advocates for victims of SA and PA. Someday Elsa hopes to tell her story in a book. Who knows, maybe a movie. Anyway, I was so glad when I can tell a story of a child that actually survives what they went through. Just nice to tell one of those stories occasionally where it doesn't end up bad. Anyway, guys, it's supposed to come a tornado after a while, and y'all know my house got hit by a tornado last year. And I petrified because this is the first one I've had since then. Not a strong chance, but there is a chance. You know, I live in Oklahoma, and right in Tornado Alley, so by the time I put this out, tornado will be over with. I started to say pray for me. Need all the prayers I can get, but be too late. Your prayers won't work. Tornado already be over, so hopefully I survive this time. I got a cellar this time. Last time I didn't, so we're good. All right, I'm going to add on. I had to do this video twice because the first one screwed up. This one may have screwed up too. I hope not, because this is a long story to tell again. But I'm going to add Simon on the end so y'all can say bye to him, because he was in my first one. I didn't let him out on this one, but anyway. All right, love y'all, and I hope y'all have a blessed weekend. I am going to go to a large antique farmer's market tomorrow, and I'm excited. Hope y'all do something fun for yourself this weekend. Go out, have a good time. You deserve it. Love y'all. Bye. Okay, make sure you go to my channel, Strange She Shed, and see what that's about. It's kind of funny. You might enjoy it. I have to be so serious on here. I like to be funny on that channel. So go look up Strange She Shed. Hey, I can leave a link below. Check it out. Me and Simon would love you too. Bye. All right, let's go. Let's go. Let's go do this. Let's go do this.